Hi there. Welcome back to the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in today's very special episode, we're going to be counting down our top 10 films from 2022.
An episode that I look forward to recording since we did our first one last year, but also get really stressed out about as well. Simply because ranking things into a list, there's so many variables that play into it, and it's really difficult to compare like where a movie should go, like especially like for me, the 1-2 spot, 4, 5, like 9 and 10, like what makes the list, what doesn't. There's so many different factors, and we'll talk about some of the factors there in a second. What do you use to as sort of criteria to get a movie into your top 10?
I guess there's a couple kind of big ones. On the one side, it has to be kind of, I guess we'll say like the technical proficiency, where like this is a well-made film. It's well written, well acted, well shot. It has something to say thematically, usually something a bit deeper than surface level, although it doesn't have to necessarily be a treatise on what it means to be a human being. It can be, sometimes movies are elevated to the point where style becomes substance, if that kind of makes sense.
Definitely.
Aside from the technical side of things and like well-made movies, because there are a lot of well-made movies, which movies spoke to me specifically and which ones were kind of my personal favorites that I connected with. And so hopefully that will provide enough context as to why there are some movies that, you know, from a technical filmmaking standpoint, probably should have been on my top 10, but I connected with other films on a more emotional, more visceral, maybe more cognitive level than some of those other very well-made films still.
For sure. You do have to look at some of this with that context, with a bit of a grain of salt as well. There's going to be so many factors that play into it. Like for myself, I think what I really fell into last year was how often am I going to rewatch a movie?
Yeah.
Like that for me is a big indicator of like how much I enjoyed a movie. So if I watch a movie 2 or 3 times in 1 year, like that movie is definitely going to show up in my top 10. There's something I get out of it. Either it's really like all the elements you said, good themes, good acting, production, good story, like any number of those things could contribute it to showing up in that rewatchability factor. So for me, that's kind of like my primary motivator, but I do recognize for this list, and I will get them in there, are movies that I've rated highly that I have no interest in really ever watching again. Maybe 15, 20 years down the road, I would go watch that film again. Like one film, for instance, 2022, All Quiet on the Western Front. It did not make my top 10, but I rated it at a 4.5 stars when I logged it in Letterboxd. And you're like, well, there are other movies that I've rated lower that I put into the top 10, probably because of that je ne sais quoi material factor about the movie. I don't know.
Yeah. I think for both of us, the top 10 isn't necessarily the quote unquote best of top 10. I don't think we're trying to make that kind of declaration. I think it's like our personal favorites from the year, which may be, there's a Venn diagram where it's overlapping with the quality of the film, but there's that certain kind of X factor where a movie connects with individuals differently that may push it onto that list, even though it might be not as highly ranked. It's like a favorite films and not best films, right? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
That's pretty fair. And I think before we tackle the top 10, we want to talk about some honorable mentions, maybe notable films that didn't make the top 10, really good movies you've seen, what stuff that barely made the cut, maybe was on the precipice. Nathan, what are some of your quote unquote honorable mentions? What are some of your highly rated films that didn't make the top 10 this year?
So one of them I have to address right away because I was going back and forth about putting this one on, and literally up until like 10 minutes before we started recording this, The Fabelmans, directed by Steven Spielberg. Amazing film. When it ended, I was disappointed because I wanted it to keep going. And it should be recognized this year. Spielberg is still like top of his game. He's still putting out really quality content, but it just didn't quite make the cut. I was going back and forth. There's another very close alternate reality where The Fabelmans is on my top 10 list.
Yeah.
Another one was Clerks 3 by Kevin Smith,
Oh yeah.
which
Yep.
was, for me, just personally, I love Kevin Smith's work. And it feels like I've, as an audience member and as a fan of his, specifically Kevin Smith, because he is so engaged with the fan base. It feels like the culmination of this 20 plus year journey that started back with Clerks. I got on that journey not quite when Clerks first came out, but still it feels like there were a lot of poignant themes going on in that movie as Kevin Smith kind of looked back on his life and his filmography. And it really, if you love Kevin Smith stuff, you probably love it. If you don't, you don't. He's one of those directors. Another one that didn't quite make the list for me, Glass Onion. Do I need to say that stupid subtitle in Knives Out Mystery?
No, you don't have to, but you've already done it, so it's too late.
Glass Onion was another great film. I love Rian Johnson. Ever since I saw Brick back in the day, I've been a huge fan. Glass Onion was no different. Again, it seemed to be, for some reason, Rian Johnson's stuff is super divisive with audiences. I've seen so many videos come up on my YouTube feed about how Glass Onion like spelled the death knell or represent the death knell of good writing in movies. I'm like, whatever. It was a great movie. If you like Knives Out, you'll love Glass Onion as well. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Nick Cage
Oh yeah.
playing Nick Cage, opposite Nick Cage, and also with Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage together. What great chemistry they had on screen. Great fun film. Again, another one where it was very kind of meta. I'm kind of looking back on his career and everything. But great. If you have a chance to check it out, absolutely check out The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Another one, a couple more. The Northman. Northman was a great movie. Just didn't quite click with me the way I was hoping it would. Bullet Train, great little surprise kind of action movie. Felt very much in the vein of like almost a mix of like Quentin Tarantino and like Smoking Aces, like Joe Carnahan kind of mayhem and dialogue and that kind of thing. It was good fun. Not quite top 10. Another one that I haven't seen mentioned a whole lot, 13 Lives, directed by Ron Howard. A couple of years back, 13 boys stuck in a cave that flooded in, I believe it was Thailand. And yeah, eventually, as most historical events, I think on a long enough timeline, you'll see every historical event represented in film at some point. But I read a book about this at one point. I was really engaged. And then the movie, also Ron Howard, great filmmaker as well, but you should check it out if you haven't seen it. Those are some of my honorable mentions. What about you, Brian? What didn't quite make the list for you, but you think is good enough to warrant a second look by people?
Man, this one is absolutely killing me because I'm looking at all these movies, and to be fair, I'm using the star system I have on Letterboxd and like saying these are all 4-star movies essentially. And they are interchangeable with a number of them. And I'm kind of almost feeling regret not putting some of these in my top 10 already.
Well, there's still time to change it on the fly, Brian.
Right? I can't go back now. It's locked in. But yeah, The Northman, Robert Eggers. I mean, it was a good movie. It was really good, and I'm gonna rewatch it.
And I loved his other stuff, and for some reason, Northman just didn't quite click with me the same way. And
yeah, it had that level of disappointment walking it, where it wasn't as strong. It's a strong movie, but it's not as strong as his other material.
Yeah. Disappointed not because the movie was terrible, but because it didn't quite click with you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
Really?
This live action animated blend. I had a lot of fun with it, but I was a huge Rescue Rangers fan when I was a kid.
Okay.
And seeing this, it's kind of like one of those legacy sequels that gets done. And I thought it was really clever. I really love the story in here. I love this world they built and how what the villains were doing. It was just really, I had a blast with it. And Bullet Train is on my
Nice.
list as well. Great theater experience, a lot of fun. Probably end up revisiting that.
We saw that together, right? That was one of the ones we saw together, and I'm like, it came out of nowhere, and I had just had a ton of fun with that one.
Very unexpected hit. There's a number of horror movies on here, and I think there might be even a lack of horror in my list. Barbarian, I thought was really good. Scream 5 or just Scream, this another like legacy reboot sequel thing. Deadstream is right there on the top of all these horror movies. Resurrection, Rebecca Hall, really solid
Yeah, it
film.
was solid for me. I think for sure, like Rebecca Hall. I don't know. Like, I don't know what Hollywood's problem is with Rebecca Hall. Can somebody please just give her all the awards already? Like, between
Right?
this and Night House, like the Night House, like 2 years in a row, giving like amazing performances that most actors would kill for. Give her all the awards, please, somebody.
Another movie that was, I think, pretty divisive amongst critics and audiences was Men by Alex Garland. I loved how insane this movie got near the end. I did not understand what was happening, but it didn't matter. I loved every second of that ending. And I really loved the suspenseful, slow buildup of horror at the beginning of just that isolation in this countryside and having somebody following you. And it was just really creepy. Unsettling. It was Something in the Dirt.
Nice.
Phenomenal film. And it's just like, I just watched it. I was like, oh, that was great. I definitely going to rewatch it again someday, but do not quite make my top 10. These movies I'm listing now are like right on the cusp of that number 10 spot. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio was incredible movie. Just incredible. Like, it was, if you're going to watch a Pinocchio film, that is the one to do. And of course, we can't make an honorable mention list without Tar on there. I mean, that movie, Cate Blanchett, I think I put on The Father in last year's list, mainly because of Anthony Hopkins acting in it. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I should be doing the same for Tar because Cate Blanchett is phenomenal. Like, this was an actor's movie. She did a really awesome job. And I think the last one that almost made the list was Prey.
Oh, really? It's high up there.
Predator prequel. I was just like, I loved the heck out of that movie. Just one of the top tier action films of the year. It felt really good. And I really look forward to like the next Predator franchise watch. It's just like every time a new one comes out, you got to go through the whole series. They're just great movies. This was no exception. And honestly, I feel like throwing out a couple more.
Holy cow.
Star ones that are notable. The Menu was really awesome. I don't think I knew quite what to make of it, but like the more I see about it, the more I'm appreciating it. I saw 100 movies released in 2022. This is like an all-time stat or high for me in my stats.
That's awesome.
Usually it's maybe 50 or 60 or something, but I think you and I both made a concentrated push to watch as many films from the year as we could. Do you remember how many you settled in on?
I got to around 60, which for me is pretty good because I think that was like 20, 15 or 20 more than the previous year. So I think we're both kind of pushing that up a little bit higher. Unfortunately, with like kids and family, I can't quite always get those movies in there. Plus, last year I also was the year kind of video games for me. I was playing a ton of video games, and so that kind of ate into my movie time a little bit. But I think it was good. I like this kind of mandate or experiment with the podcast is kind of forcing us to. Not forcing us, but part of our mandate is to like review newer films, and so it's forcing me maybe to watch films that I might otherwise have ignored that year. So I think it's really good for me to kind of force me out of my comfort zone a little bit too, and seek out some more movies that I might otherwise not have taken a look at as recently either. There might have been like cult classics that I would check out 20 years later. Yeah,
well, exactly. And I feel compelled to watch a lot of these movies because they are new releases, and I'm thinking in advance that, we got to assemble these top 10 lists. I got to put in the numbers, so it's a sort of a nice selection. And this year, it just so happens, I think I was 4 movies away from seeing all the Oscar-nominated like Best Picture movies, and quite a few other ones, like All Quiet on the Western Front was nominated, but it was also on my watch list. And I think I'm up to 9 out of 10 now. Just need one more, which I think is in the theater. But it's been fun sort of focusing on newer movies like that. And after this list, after this episode, I think it's going to be a couple weeks of classics and older stuff that I need to get caught up on. I'm taking a break from new films. With that being said, should we start the top 10?
Yeah, definitely.
You want to go first with your number 10
I want to
entry?
go first? Yeah, it's going to be interesting after hearing some of the ones you excluded from your top 10. Maybe we're not going to have as much overlap as we thought.
I know, based on that, like we have, like for fairness here, we haven't like shared our top 10 with each other. We don't know what's on each other's lists. You listing some of yours, I'm just like, oh yeah, I have a feeling these movies, and I mentioned a couple of them, are probably going to be in your top 10, and I'm excited to see where we've landed.
Okay, so drum roll. Number 10 for me. Start at the bottom, go from 10 up to 1. 10 for me was Avatar: The Way of Water, and I had to put this somewhere on the top 10 list just because it hit that criteria. This was a groundbreaking film in terms of visual effects and CGI and motion capture, and seeing it in the theater with my kids. This was a movie that, okay, the theater experience is not completely dead yet. Like, James Cameron is around. 3D is not dead yet. 3D still works in the right hands.
It could still be a magical experience.
Yeah, and that's what it was. It was a magical experience. This is one of those movies that was not as deep maybe in the plot. All the themes were pretty obvious, surface level, but as an experience where I felt transported to another world, I felt like a kid again watching movies. Yeah, like Avatar: The Way of Water was just one of those movies that hopefully people are still going to be talking about. It's one of those movies that's going to push like the technical side of filmmaking forward. It's an incredible experience. Put it that way.
My number 10 might need a little explanation here.
Okay.
This is Night. This is Night of the Coconut. Directed by Patrick Willems. And we talked about this in the past there. I think I added it to my diary, and you questioned me on it right after seeing it because I gave it 5 stars. I gave it the heart icon. And you're like, what is this random obscure movie? Because this is a pretty obscure film.
Yeah. So explain to people about the origins of this film. People who might not know.
So yeah, Patrick Willems, he's a video essayist, movie film on YouTube, but most notably recently in the past few years on the Nebula streaming service. Essentially, for maybe a year or so, he started and ended all of his videos with a narrative about a semi-sentient coconut. All right, I won't go into all the details here, but every video had this, and so there was this running narrative throughout the year, and this was like a season. They were going to say it was a season. And at the end of the season, he said, all right, I'm going to do a video that is 100% narrative. Like, it's going to be a little mini feature movie, and it's going to sort of wrap up the season and some of these storylines that have been going on. And I think with some behind-the-scenes stuff with Nebula, that they, like the streaming service, was going to take an opportunity to start creating a lot of their own content and funding certain projects. So this is one of the projects I think that they actually put some money behind and said, let's spend a little extra time, put some money into this creator, and all, like Patrick and his friends are like the main stars, but like, let's get some more assistance with this and let them do what they want to do. And they ended up with a full-length feature film that premiered on the streaming service. They even had a theatrical release date in New York, like just like a one-night premiere where they all attended. And being part of that whole thing, like just as a viewer myself, and like in some way like financing a bit of it through my Nebula subscription, because it's only on this one streaming service. It's like, yeah, I'm going to pay for this. There's a lot of other content on there, but it's like, this is almost like a mini Patreon that's I'm going to support. Seeing this at home on the day of release, it was just something that felt utterly unique. Like, I'm following these people who are passionate about movies, and here they are, they get to make a fairly polished film that was a lot of fun. There's a certain brand of humor in the movie that I really enjoy. The story is good, it's fun. There's a musical number halfway through the movie. It was just a blast from like start to finish, and it's just like, it just was a very unique experience. I'm like, this went outside the box of regular movie viewing that I usually do, like at the theater, or you just look forward to the next big blockbuster or whatever. This was something else. And as a bonus, on Letterboxd, they do like a yearly stat thing, and one of the elements to get into their yearly stats is having at least like 2,000 people rate your movie. So they did a little campaign at the end of the year to have people rate the movie, and they actually made it into these lists and were rated higher than other movies. And I should have brought up some of the lists there, because they edged out these other like really well-known famous directors and stuff, but only I think because mean, the movie's good. Is it 5 stars? Maybe not, but everyone who's watching it is kind of like in on it and they're going to rate it highly. So it ends up showing up in a lot of like top 10 or top 15 lists. And I had to put it on here. There's no question about it. It was just a blast.
Oh, that's great. Cue the This Is Cinema GIF from Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go into your number 9.
Number 9 for me was Something in the Dirt by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. A couple of years back, Brian, you introduced me to this little film called Resolution, and I was hooked immediately. And it was these two guys, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who filmed this thing on their own dime on weekends, put together an amazing film. And ever since then, I've been a huge fan of all their stuff, like from Resolution, and then the next one, what was it, Spring, and then it goes, what was the other movie?
The Endless.
The Endless. I can't believe I blanked on The Endless. And then Synchronic, I think, was last year or the year before, where they finally got a budget for it. And then I think Something in the Dirt was made during the pandemic, and it is truly like a horror movie. Would you classify it as horror, maybe? Horror, thriller, sci-fi?
It's very much like a psychological, like maybe. Horror, sci-fi. It's a good blend, but
psychological
it's like,
sci-fi, horror, thriller for our time. It's rife with conspiracy theories and wild ramblings mixed in with like so many elements would make you question whether what you're watching on screen is real or not, and whether what the characters experienced and their recollections are real or not. I think it really played into that sense of isolation and all the conspiracy theories going around with related to COVID. And, like conspiracy theories have been going on for, back in the year, 999, when it was going to be like, oh, it's the year 1000. They had conspiracy theories about the end of the world. So it's been going on for literally thousands of years. But yeah, just a great movie, another great turn from them, and I'm biased to their stuff. Whatever they put down so far, I'm picking up. So Something in the Dirt, I highly recommend. If you haven't seen any of Benson and Moorhead stuff, you can jump in at any point. Probably best to go back to the beginning. I don't want to spoil. That's the thing. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But Something in the Dirt is standalone. Great, and then great performances. Like you can see them both maturing as both filmmakers behind and in front of the camera. I think their acting you can see getting better as well. And it was really interesting to see, because there's been such a push against smoking in general in society, just to see people casually smoking again. It was really interesting.
It's like a throwback to the movies from the 80s and 90s that we would see where they just didn't care as much.
People just sitting around talking and smoking. Yeah, it was great. It was it was just a great film. Definitely recommend it.
I'm glad you could get that on the list, because I think last year when we were doing the 2021, I think Synchronic came out.
It was a weird release,
unofficially, right? It was like considered a 2020 film by Letterboxd standards, but it was like released like on a wider like video on demand thing due to the pandemic in 2021. And you didn't get a chance to put it on your top 10 list at that time, but I'm glad to see their representation on this list here, because it was a really good film. Definitely, I think you would get more out of it on multiple watches.
Yeah,
too.
It's one of those kind of films for sure. All right, what's your number 9, Brian?
Number 9 here is Avatar: The Way of Water.
Number 9,
not too far off from your number 10. Yeah, well, this is the thing. Night of the Coconut, I think, kind of like pushed everything upwards a little bit. Maybe this would be normally falling back a little bit, but Avatar, 2022 was kind of like the year of the return to cinema, right?
Yeah,
and having this show up at the end of the year as like this other reminder of why we go out to the theater to experience movies. The 3D is top notch, and they don't really make 3D TVs anymore. So you're not going to get this at home unless you have like a set from 10 years ago and your glasses still work.
Wow.
Right. Like the high frame rate on this was pretty neat. The technology was able to create this world that everyone wants to go visit. Like it really did transport me to another dimension.
Yeah.
In a world where we're blasted with so many big budget movies that look kind of bland, and I'm squarely pointing at kind of comic book movies for the most part. This one felt oddly refreshing, even though this is a huge like Disney movie, essentially. This movie cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make. It's $1 billion like passion project by James Cameron. And it's going to spawn a whole franchise of films that, you know, he's guaranteed that you're making 3 or 4 more of these things. And it still feels like I'm welcoming another franchise into my life with open arms, where I'm really like, for the most part, like, no, get these franchises away from me. It's like Avatar, you can come in, please. You're absolutely fine to
there's something so refreshing where somebody comes in like a James Cameron or a Christopher Nolan and reminds us like, oh yeah, this is what blockbuster filmmaking could be or can be again. You know, like this is, it doesn't have to be just a bunch of noise on the screen, because like it can actually be action you can actually follow. All the action doesn't have to take place at night, and when it is at night, you can still light it so you can see what's going on.
Oh, yeah, that was the thing. Like the underwater scenes, by all accounts, should be pretty dark in there, and I think even like the finale kind of happens at night partially, and you can still see everything going on.
Everything.
You and your blue cat people in this movie. All right, hit me with your number 8. Leaving on with your best shot.
With Nathan's weird sexual fetishes. Okay, number 8. Another amazing blockbuster movie, Top Gun Maverick.
Oh yeah,
one of these legacy sequels that could have easily gone completely sideways, but not only was it just back to basics, crowd-pleasing action movie, credible action, like visually, incredibly clear stakes, not a lot of convoluted backstory and all this stuff. It was also, there were these themes of, it was commenting on the generational differences and how things are changing, but how people are trying to cling to the past, but they need to let go, but they shouldn't let go of everything. And there was actually some like deeper stuff going on thematically. But at the end of the day, again, this is why people go to the movies. This was a movie made to be seen in theaters or on the biggest screen possible. But this was truly one of those movies that was an experience and a complete paradox, because it went the complete opposite way of Avatar, where it did as much practical shooting as possible to the point where they actually had actors in the jets. And there's a whole behind the scenes of how they retrofitted jets so they had the camera equipment in there that the actors were having to like operate themselves in midair while they were being flown around in these jets by actual pilots. It's like the visuals are incredible, and essentially, like, for what the plot that boils down to, essentially doing the Death Star run from A New Hope. I was engaged the whole time. And the whole cast, you know, Tom Cruise, Miles Teller, Jennifer Connelly, John Hamm, amazing. If that is Val Kilmer's last on-screen performance, an amazing, touching send-off for Val Kilmer again, who has gone through some recent health issues. Directed by Joseph Kosinski, who he directed Oblivion, which should have been, it was an original sci-fi idea again, starring Tom Cruise. I wish we lived in a universe where that and Tron Legacy were huge successes, and to see what he could have done with the right kind of backing. But even that, we still got Top Gun Maverick out of him, so I can't be that disappointed, I guess.
Well, it's kind of nice that Tom Cruise has worked with Kosinski on Oblivion and would choose to work with him again, even though Oblivion and Tron Legacy were not big box office smashes. I think Tom Cruise aligns himself with talent he really gets along with and is going to allow him to like realize some of his visions, and to bring back Top Gun and have that director in there. Yeah, I mean, it says a lot to be like, this guy, we should be applauding his movies more than we have at the box office in financial terms.
And just to show like legacy sequel does not have to be a bad word. You like there are no genres or types of movies that can't be done if they're done well. Legacy sequels can be done well if you just replicate exactly whatever they did in Top Gun Maverick. Capture that lightning in a bottle again. Easy.
No problem. Just every year, do one of those.
Do what they did. Do what Joseph Kosinski and Tom Cruise did. All right, what's your number 8?
Number 8 is The Batman.
The Batman. Really?
This one was sort of teetering on the brink of not on the list because I think typically I like to have some representation of different genres in my top 10. And The Batman is so easy because it literally stands way above any other superhero movie released last year and even over possibly the last few years. It felt so good. It was a lot of fun to watch. And to be fair, we recorded an episode about this, and I think it was a lot of like pointing out the flaws of the movie, and we were kind of like a little sour on it, but we still gave it high ratings because we really love the movie. And I think that's something that I can appreciate, is that we can still pick apart things that we love and still have the respect for them.
Absolutely.
Right? The Batman, man, I mean, I've already rewatched it twice last year, picked up the 4K disc, and we're going to watch it again soon.
Nice.
This is a great film. I'm really looking forward to Matt Reeves' trilogy with all the DCEU stuff or DCU, whatever they do. It sounds like they're going to let him do
DC Elseworlds now, yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't care less about. I just want to see all this. If Elseworlds is, I don't want to date this too much, but like if Elseworlds are these nice standalone movies, only give me Elseworlds movies. Like let me see these tight stories, have talented actors show up, awesome directors. Man,
100%.
And last but not least for The Batman, that soundtrack was from another world, man. Wow.
I did, yeah. Like leaving the theater with my son watching that, I think it was a great experience being able to share Batman with my son on the big screen. But like I was humming that tune as I was leaving, like dun 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 dun. Yeah, it was great.
It was amazing. I really, I mean, I do love superhero movies. As much as I lament them and criticize them, they're still a lot of fun. But this one, it does stand above the others. Like Batman's always going to be a character favorite of mine.
Yeah, I think he's a favorite of both of ours, so we're probably biased toward the Batman a little bit too.
Yeah, which is probably why we were so hard on the movie when we were doing the episode. It's like we don't
love it so much.
Seem like fanboys sometime. I mean, this happens all the time when we record episodes. It's just like, oh, we're basically fanboys of this movie. Like we're just gonna love it from top to bottom. But yeah, no, The Batman, number 8. We're up to number 7 now. What's taking your number 7 slot?
7. This was an easy one to put in the top 10. I knew it had to go on here the moment I was like 20 minutes in. I was like, yeah, this is going on my top 10 list. It was The Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh, yes.
By Martin McDonagh, starring Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Carrie Condon, who was in Rome. I was trying to place her the whole time. She was from Rome. And Barry Keoghan. Man, Martin McDonagh, like, he just seems to keep getting better and better with each movie. Yeah. And The Banshees of Inisherin, we have a whole episode about this where we talk about, like, from a visual standpoint and an acting standpoint, a story standpoint, amazing. But there was so many different layers thematically if you dig down, and so many different layers of meaning. And it was such a moving film. And I think you and I watched it and we discussed the themes, and you and I both got something completely different out of it. We had some overlapping experience, but like two different people can watch the same movie and it can touch them and they can pull a completely different meaning out of it. And they're both completely validated by the text. What an amazing experience. No, this is a complete departure from, this was not a big blockbuster movie. It was heartfelt and touching and moving, amazing performances. Colin Farrell comes back and shows people exactly why he's an A-list actor. Brendan Gleeson, amazing as always. Whole cast, everything about this movie was on point. And just like always, I'm waiting with bated breath to see what Martin McDonagh puts out next. Because for me, he's just one of those directors. Everything I'm gonna start Martin McDonagh section in my directors section of my my Blu-ray collection. Now I have to now. He's just I love watching his stuff.
And this is only at number 7 on this list.
You can imagine it only gets better from here.
Just listening to your passion plea about this movie, it's just like, oh man, this is like top 3 material. But no, we did not skip any numbers.
You should see the top 3.
Still
then.
Number 7.
Yeah, what's your number 7 then, there, Brian?
My number 7 is The Fabelmans by Spielberg.
Nice.
This is kind of one I really struggle with this because, as I mentioned before, I'm probably not going to rewatch this movie. Like, it's one of those movies where it's like, this is a phenomenal film. It's so well constructed. It's so well directed. The acting is beautiful. Everything is fantastic about this. And I really love seeing that, like, the semi autobiographical, like, kind of fictionalized version of Spielberg, because we grew up with Spielberg movies and getting a taste of like what his childhood was like and the things he went through, and having the movie kind of be like a tribute to his parents, and but still being like critical of his upbringing, like through that lens of their divorce and whatnot.
Very hard hitting. Yeah.
Like you said earlier, I wanted more and more out of this movie. Like when they are rolling credits and it's like he's just landing in Los Angeles or whatever to get some of his first jobs in the industry, is like, tell me there's a sequel to this.
Exactly.
Like, we could probably go read all the stuff that happens afterwards, but it's like, yeah, no, the Fabelmans really worked for me.
Yeah. I want Spielberg to tell us the story. Yeah.
And yeah, I felt like it deserved a spot in the top 10. And it's also the element of Spielberg not being in my cinema scope for the past decade almost, because Ready Player One completely soured me on him for a long time.
Yeah.
And he did a couple other movies there, like West Side Story, but I don't really watch musicals. I'm not going to go watch that like right out the gate. And he hasn't done a whole lot of stuff in the past few years. And it's just like, bam, he comes out with the Fabelmans. And just in case, like I personally kind of forgot, I moved on to a lot of other filmmakers. He comes out with this and you're like, yeah, Spielberg's got it. He's never lost it. He's a phenomenal director. And Fabelmans was just really good.
Yeah, if there was a top 11, it would have been on there for sure. I don't know. I'm back and forth. The Fabelmans, yeah, this is the thing.
Number 11 has like 14 movies sitting there, I think. We got to march forward, right, though. What is your number 6?
Number 6 was actually one of your honorable mentions. It's Men by one Alex Garland.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who directed Ex Machina and Annihilation, which I know is one of your favorite films. I think it's one of your, on Letterboxd, it's one of your 4 films that you have up there.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Alex Garland as well. He also, like, he started off as a novelist. He wrote The Beach. I think he also adapted the screenplay for that as well. I think he wrote 28 Days Later as well. He did the screenplay for that and eventually got into directing. And Men was, again, I completely understand why this was such a divisive film. It's a very non-traditional storytelling structure. It's a non-narrative story structure, if that makes sense, right? Less about like a plot that makes sense, like a linear plot, and more about the feelings he's trying to convey from scene to scene. And it's a lot of the imagery is very metaphorical and not literal. So like the things that are happening on screen, not necessarily literally happening. It's
that's right.
It's a metaphorical tale. Really powerful themes in terms of different ways that, men control and manipulate women. You look at the 2 main characters played by Jesse Buckley and Rory Kinnear. Rory Kinnear, his performance in this, where he was playing like a couple main characters, but like she went to the pub at one point, and Rory Kinnear was like playing like 20 different characters, and they were all different.
Yeah, he plays almost all the men in this movie.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing visually. Pretty, I think it's incredibly important and timely, thematically, coming on the tails of when people are forgetting about the Me Too movement, kind of. As movements tend to do, it's getting lost in all the other noise, and to have Alex Garland bring these issues to the forefront again is incredibly important and incredibly engaging for me. But like I said, out of all of our Alex Garland's movies that he's directed so far, Men is probably the most inscrutable so far. It's the hardest to get into, probably for a wider range of audiences. And I completely get that this is not going to connect with a lot of people just from the way the story is told and the way the movie is shot. But for me, I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to see what Alex Garland does next. And I can't recommend Men highly enough. Great film. Amazing.
every single movie he's directed has been a banger. Like I love
Yeah.
every single one. And honestly, I don't think you and I had talked about this movie at all last year. And I was kind of shocked. I just about rolled back in my chair that you had it in your top 10.
Really?
I was not expecting that to be there because I think other people I've talked to haven't held it in that same regard, like it, and obviously seeing the divisiveness of it online.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the movies that I went out and bought on like Blu-ray within a month or two of it being available. It's like, I don't find myself doing that too often. And I didn't really think about that as a factor for putting together my top 10, but maybe it should be in my top 10.
Maybe you're just not
This is going to be a common theme throughout this episode.
You're just not a true Alex Garland fan after all, Brian.
Oh. Well, I'll one up you a little bit, and I'll ask if you've seen his TV series Devs.
No, I haven't. Okay. All right. You got your crown back, Brian.
We're at least settled evenly there. So at least you can go watch that and appreciate his TV work too.
Absolutely. As I sit around waiting for the remake of The Beach. All right. What's your number 6 there, Brian?
You can't remake The Beach though.
He's Alex Garland. He can do whatever he wants.
Man, as long as you cast Leo in it still, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
So yeah, my number 6 is a movie you previously mentioned is Top Gun Maverick.
Nice. Oh, and it's super high up there.
This was such a blast to watch. And
amazing.
This, I mean, did it save cinema? You can put it save cinema in quotes for me. Sure. It brought people back to screens into the theater houses. It was such a smart move for them to delay it by multiple years till, I know the pandemic's not over, but everything is open and people were hesitant to jump back into it. And I think the success of this one at the box office shows people are willing to come back and they're willing to support this stuff. This thing works on so many different levels. It's a visual feast, right? The practical effects are next level. And I really hope that other filmmakers see this and say, we got to do more practical effects. We got to do stuff like this. We got to put actors in the air at 20,000 feet in fighter jets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the Legacy sequel, I mean, it was handled so well. I love that they didn't ignore his age, that other characters came through, like seeing Val Kilmer in there. The romance between Cruise's character and Jennifer Connelly felt like genuine and like full of history. Like they seemed like a good matching in the film,
Age
and it was just like it felt
if
natural.
That makes sense. Like it felt like these are two people who were like in the second phase of their life, who were like, they're not acting like little like teenagers. Well, they kind of are, but
that's right.
But it's like you could tell. It's like, oh, there's a maturity to this relationship that you could tell it was different than they represented in the first movie, right?
Yeah, like Maverick has truly grown up. Like that was 30 plus years ago, and 30 plus years ago in his life, and he's aged a bit and he's matured a bit. He's still, pulling stunts and whatnot, but he knows when it's time to do business. And man, this was just really awesome.
There's always that very poignant theme, and especially as you get older, I think your perspective switches a bit. But in movies, you'll see like that generational that clash between generations, and like, oh, we don't do things like that anymore for good reason. Like we have these protocols in place, or we do things differently now. But then every once in a while, it's like, oh, those old school methods and those, like they're still useful and they still work in certain situations. So like that, almost like that synthesis of the old and the new together, right? It's not an either or proposition. I find myself as I get older, I like that synthesis idea a lot more.
Right. Yeah. And I gotta say, like the Legacy sequel thing, it's absolutely terrifying because we've seen so many remakes and reboots that just don't hold a candle to the original, and continuing the story is also going to be very difficult.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
A few years previous, we had Blade Runner 2049, which I think, phenomenal movie, but doesn't do well at the box office, right? Like it's just unattainable sci-fi. But it was terrifying going into that movie thinking this was going to be awful. And the same thing with Top Gun Maverick. I'm thinking, how could they're just cashing in on the Top Gun name. They're just making a buck.
Exactly.
And it was so much more than that somehow. Even though they made $1 billion, it felt like it was more than just the money at stake here.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it takes to make those sequels. You treat it with respect. You treat it like you would any movie, and it's not just selling nostalgia back to people. Part of it's nostalgia, but part of it's you have to have a story to tell. You have to have something to say underneath all the loud planes and explosions. And I think they had that with this movie. It was nice to see that somebody else, Christopher Nolan, isn't the only one holding up the blockbuster genre to a higher standard anymore. Like there's other people out there who can still make great blockbusters with something important to say.
Definitely. What are we at now? Number 5?
Now we're getting to the creme de la creme here, the top 5 here.
Oh my God. Yeah, my anxiety is rising to get into the top 5.
There's some movies that I haven't heard you say yet, either in your honorable mentions or in your list so far. So I'm thinking there's going to be at least a little bit of overlap in our top 5 here.
Yeah.
But I'll start with number 5 here. I have Nope, written and directed by one Jordan Peele.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't know. We have a whole episode about this. We dug into this again from a filmmaking perspective, from a story perspective, from a thematic perspective. There is so much going on in Nope. It's amazing. The trilogy so far from Jordan Peele, Get Out, Us, and Nope. Like you're saying, Nope, I picked up. I have it sitting on my shelf. I bought it on 4K a couple weeks after we watched it for the first time.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele is hands down one of the best filmmakers working in horror. Probably one of the best filmmakers working in Hollywood, I dare say. And the fact that I think Nope got completely shut out at the Oscars this year, which for those people who care about that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a criminal act.
That seems kind of criminal. I mean, you looked at the breakdowns of some of the cinematography. Yeah, just visually what's going on. Some of it's very simple. Some of it's just in the framing of a shot. But then you have something like the Akira slide on the motorcycle in there. Little fanboy things that he puts in there. Like watching Nope, like watching all of Jordan Peele's stuff. There's just this sense of being completely unsettled. It's that kind of like deep in your bones kind of horror. It's not like jump scares or people getting cut up with chainsaws. It's very like you're feeling very creeped out. After watching something like Nope, these are the kind of movies where I have to turn the lights on to get back upstairs at night because I'm just like I'm unsettled afterwards. It's truly, this to me is what horror was meant to be. This is cinema.
Yeah.
Nope is just Nope is just another great entry for me. I think Jordan Peele. I think I rated them all I think they're 5 out of 5s for me. Like they're all amazing films so far. I don't know if I'm setting him up on a pedestal in my own mind. Can he live up to that with his next movies? I don't know. But for now, Nope, check it out. If you haven't seen it, immediately turn off this podcast, go watch Nope.
It's funny too because it's like 3 movies in, like it's 15 out of 15 stars possible for this guy. And it's like I feel as though there's like this emergence of really good talent and directing over the past few years. And I mean, we mentioned The Northman and I think both are honorable lists. And it's like Robert Eggers has done 3 movies and they're all really amazing. But when it comes down to like rating them, you think, well, I'm going to rate these against each other because they're directed by the same person. It's like, I'm going to rate The Northman a bit lower, even though it might be a 4.5 or even probably not 5-star, but it could be up there. Right. And Jordan Peele just knocks it out of the park every single time. Again, it's another one like these legacy sequels, like Top Gun, where I go in thinking, oh my goodness, when is his stinker movie?
Yeah, exactly.
and Nope was like the complete opposite. For me, it was even better than his previous movie, Us. The guy can do no wrong right now.
Yeah. I can't recommend it highly enough. And in a way, maybe probably Jordan Peele's not too happy about not getting nominated, but for me, it's almost like still like it's like a niche thing. It's like a secret. We're part of a secret club of people who have discovered Jordan Peele's films, and it feels good to be part of that club. And maybe not everybody understands that, and that's probably not cool for Jordan Peele. But I sincerely hope that more people discover his movies and get involved in them. I think they're also, I mean, you look at the themes of them, all of them, they're incredibly important, especially what's going on today. A lot of commentary on class and race. And again, like he's giving a lot of opportunities specifically to like black actors, and instead of having all white casts constantly. And it's just great, right? We have people like, was it Daniel Kaluuya, who's been he's been on a hot streak since he started appearing on screen. And Kiki Palmer, who I hadn't heard of before, but she did great. Stephen Yeun. And then Admiral Anderson himself, Keith David was in there.
Yeah, amazing cast.
All right, what's your number 5? Getting in the top here.
Number 5 is Glass Onion.
Oh.
Which I kind of surprised myself by putting this on the list even so high, because when I first watched this movie, I kind of walked away a little disappointed.
Really?
Even though when I logged it on Letterboxd, I still gave it 4.5 stars. So I couldn't have been that disappointed in the movie. And it's because it's a sequel. It's another entry, in from Knives Out, the original. And I love Knives Out. Whenever Knives Out came out, it was my number 1 movie of the year. It was just hands down the best one I'd seen that year. And so Glass Onion had a lot to live up to. And I think after I watched this, and I'm like, I didn't think it was clever enough. But what I've realized is that I don't think I'm smart enough to fully comprehend the movie on first viewing and understand everything that's going on, right? Because there's a lot of, it's the onion metaphor here. There's a lot of layers to the movie, right? And it's like a lot of things are in plain sight because it is the glass onion, and there's a lot of hidden things. There's a lot of like the narrative is a little bit broken up too, where you're telling things a little bit out of order. The mystery wasn't like super surprising or anything, but I don't think it needed to be, and it shouldn't have been in a movie called Glass Onion, where it's just like, we know who's at fault here. We know who does the murder, but how do you get there? And I've always talked about this too, where it's like, all right, you can spoil the end of a movie for me. I'm not going to be super upset because it's the journey that gets you there, right? So I don't know why I was getting upset at the ending. It's like, the murder was too obvious. Brian, you've been talking about the journey there all this time. And the journey in this movie was phenomenal. Daniel Craig, this guy, his character here, phenomenal. The cast of characters.
Yeah, I want at least 10 more of these movies with him as Benoit Blanc.
Easily. Like, Rian Johnson is basically a genius, and I love a lot of his movies. And these, if we're going to call these Knives Out mysteries, I love these murder mysteries. And this is not really a genre that I think I've gone into in the past. And I'm kind of maybe looking forward to exploring some of the origins of the murder mystery genre, and maybe even some murder mystery novels, because it's just...
Start reading some Agatha Christie. Although you have Poker Face to look forward to, right?
Yes, that's right.
The new series by Rian Johnson, starring what's her name from Russian Doll,
Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah, who I think people, after seeing her, the complete tangent, keep it short. People were saying it's like, she has this kind of gravelly voice. It's like, she'd be great as like if they did a Columbo reboot. And so this is almost, I think this is almost like taking, like Rian Johnson said, a Columbo reboot with Natasha Lyonne. I was like, okay, let's do it. Yeah. Done.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Looking forward to rewatching Glass Onion. I think it came out near the end of the year, so it's like I haven't really had a chance to rewatch it again. Based on that criteria, I'm going to rewatch this a bunch of times. Like, it's going to be a double header, and once a third one comes out, you're going to be watching these forever.
On rewatch, so Glass Onion is so great. My wife had it on one night. She didn't watch it with me the first time, but she had it on. I went up and watched it with her again, and rewatching it, it gets better and better. And I think people who were criticizing the movie for like the mystery being too obvious are missing the point of the movie. The movie's just like Knives Out. It's more about the commentary and the themes, the social commentary and the themes of what's going on, and like looking at the group of people there. The shitheads, he's clearly satirizing a lot of trends currently and a lot of different people in our current culture that need to have the finger kind of pointed at them. They need to be made fun of. So it's an incredibly prescient movie as well. Yeah.
Amazing. We are at your number 4.
Number 4 for me, and this was going to be higher until a couple other movies came in, is Deadstream.
Ooh.
Deadstream kind of came out of nowhere. This low budget movie, I think it was I think it was originally released on Shudder. I think it was a Shudder exclusive.
I believe so. Yeah.
But yeah, directed by Vanessa Winter and Joseph Winter. Directed and written by Vanessa and Joseph Winter, starring Joseph Winter and Melanie Stone. I think you introduced this to me. You told me about this movie, and I went and checked it out, and I was blown away. By far my favorite horror film of the year. This had some serious Evil Dead vibes to it, and
Yeah.
I loved it. As an Evil Dead fan, going that way to mix up that kind of comedy and the horror in a very specific way, it could go either way. If you're drawing on tropes that remind people of Evil Dead, which I think they were doing pretty explicitly, like those are some big shoes to fill, and by God, they filled them. Amazing from beginning to end. I was completely on board with this. I watched it twice this year. Once with my son, he wanted to start watching horror movies with me, and I thought this would be a good starting point because it's gruesome, but it's not too gruesome. But yeah, the rating already went up. I think it's going to be like a full 5 stars. I think I'm at 4.5 and a heart, I think, on Letterboxd. Just completely fun time watching this. I was engaged the whole time. And then like legitimately scary. Like I was creeped out. I felt my pulse getting higher as I was watching this, and the main character there kept getting into trouble. It was amazing. Very, very kind of like Ash Williams from Evil Dead kind of vibes of the character who's kind of a jerk, but still somehow pulling it off, like fighting it back dead.
I love the innovation on the found footage genre for this movie, where he was live streaming it. And live streaming has really took off in the past 4 or 5 years. Everyone's kind of familiar with Twitch and video game streaming and streaming other content. And you're like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like the whole YouTube crowd of people spending nights in haunted places, going places where they shouldn't be, which is also reflected in here, because this is also like a redemption for him, where he got into trouble and he's trying to come back into the media spotlight because he's done some crummy things in the past, and he's going to spend the night at a haunted place, and he's interacting with viewers, and there's all sorts of on-screen text throughout the movie where you see the viewers chatting and it feels kind of genuine, and he's reacting to that and changing what he does on his stream. And it really pulled together. And I kind of regret not putting this in my top 10 at this point, because we did watch this and we talked passionately about it in an episode. It was an awesome movie.
You can see the passion from the filmmakers. This is a very low budget movie, and this is just these people going out and kind of shooting this guerrilla style. But yeah, like to breathe life into a genre that I thought was completely stale and used up, the found footage genre, to do that in a way that it didn't stand out. It was so subtle. I was like, oh yeah, this is a found footage movie, but it's still great. It's not, the concept was so baked in, and then to have that kind of social commentary about like watching this guy as a YouTuber just saying and do the stupid things that he was saying and doing. Like my son, and I had to crack down on him. There was a couple of YouTubers like, oh my God, like there are people in real life doing and saying stupid stuff like this. Yeah. It was so true to life. This kind of parody of, not parody, maybe satire of that YouTube, Twitch streaming, live streaming kind of culture and the more negative aspects of that culture. It was also a very timely movie, right? It was like thematically, I think it's an important movie to watch, but also great, just an all around great movie. Deadstream, check it out. Support the Winters, Vanessa and Joseph. Can't wait to see what they put out next. What's your number 4, Brian?
Number 4 is RRR. The film that really like took my movie sphere online, like the Twitter sphere, YouTube, like everyone I follow was talking about this movie. And wow, like this had me gripped from start. It's a 3-hour movie and it feels like nothing. Like it's constantly on the go. I think I've mentioned before, like some of these movies kind of like felt refreshing, but this one like really takes the cake. This is like the movie of 2022 that like had me appreciating the movie hobby. Like This is why I say this with more frequency now, but it's like, this is why I love movies right here. And having it be a foreign film of a country like Indian cinema that I just don't have much experience with, like really at all.
Hollywood.
And having this be the introduction is like, man, I don't know if anything else can compete, right? It's just like, is it all downhill from here? Or is there a lot more gems to find? But man, like the stylized action here, I mean, there's good themes. The story is engaging. The bromance going on here, like the friendship between these two guys is phenomenal. It goes from like comedy to serious drama to action. It gets silly at times. It's not afraid to go into these places. It has this killer musical halfway through the film that's just fantastic. Like the end credits with its musical too. It's just, I didn't think I'd be really enjoying it, but man, the hype around the movie was huge. And for me, it lived up to every single expectation I had going in. It's like, you couldn't have overhyped this movie. It was just awesome. And it's like, it kind of felt like being part of, like saying quotes, like the big club, because I think like this didn't see a theatrical release across North America, but like it did in different pockets. It didn't come out in our areas, but like, yeah, I would have loved to go see this in the theater on the big screen because this is a big movie. But seeing like being part of that, it's just like Night of the Coconut, where it's like being part of that community was like, made the movie better. It's like, I'm glad I'm a part of this movie community to point me into movies like this and that I don't miss out on them. And then telling everybody I know to just go watch this movie. Don't care about the length. Don't care about it's subtitled. Bring on more of this stuff. It's just awesome from top to bottom.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect segue actually into my number 3, which is RRR. Again, like you said, this movie is essentially, it's hype proof. Like no matter how much you hype this movie, it's not near, you cannot capture the insanity and the intensity of the actions, and maybe not drama, maybe the melodrama of everything going on the screen.
Yeah.
And this was, from the very first frame through the very end. I can't remember what it was. It was like 3 hours and something long. It felt like it flew by. I wanted more. I can't wait for RRR 2, Electric Boogaloo. Yeah. Like again, I think we have a whole episode on this where we talk about just like how we thought, like, or I thought like I'd seen everything that action movies had to offer, and then something like RRR comes along and does things that like just like blew my mind. And like, okay, human creativity has not reached its limits yet. There are still boundaries and frontiers we have yet to traverse.
Well, this is the thing. You're like, exactly as you said, where you thought you've seen every action movie. You thought you've seen every action set piece. And then we have like a couple movies like Top Gun showing us action in the sky. It's like, we've seen this before. Oh my God, we haven't seen this before. And then RRR, we're seeing dudes throwing like mountain lions at other people. And you're like, this is awesome. Like I've never seen this before. And it's just, it feels so refreshing to get into.
Yeah, just perfectly like in terms of tone. The actors were great. This was
so good.
I really hope that this is kind of a watershed moment where Western audiences we're going to be exposed to more and more kind of Tollywood and Indian films in a more mainstream way on some of the more mainstream, maybe streaming platforms and things like that. The way that, for example, I think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was one of those moments for like Asian cinema. I know Asian cinema, like in the West, goes back farther than that, obviously. Every once in a while you have those movies that remind North American audiences specifically is like, oh yeah, there's an entire world of cinema out there. And I hope that we get more access to that. I'm really, really hoping that RRR gets a nice physical release, something on physical media that we can pick up. I really want to watch it in the original language as well, because I think even on Netflix it was dubbed. It was the Hindi version, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I want to get it. I want to get it on physical media. Whoever's in charge of whoever has the rights for RRR, call up Criterion or Arrow or somebody, get this on the books right away.
Yeah, it deserves a new wide release for sure.
So now we're like the creme de la creme here, the top 3. What's your third?
Top 3.
Third from the top here. Number 3 for Brian.
Number 3 is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. You know it had to make an appearance near the top. This movie blew my socks off. Just like some of these other entries here, where it's like I was not expecting this. There was a decent amount of hype around this movie, and I wasn't expecting so much depth out of this film. Like I thought it was just going to be kind of a fun little like action film, but you got so much more out of it. Michelle Yeoh, oh, like top of her game. The other actors here, phenomenal. You recognize so many faces. I can't remember his name right
Ki-Wei
now.
Kwan.
Yes,
Short
thank you.
round.
Hasn't been acting in decades, and he comes back with this. And I think he got an Oscar nomination for this as well.
Oh, awesome.
He should be back in other movies. There's so many interesting things going on in here. The story is good. The layering is good. The humor is fantastic. Like the silliness. Like I love that they embrace it while also having pretty heavy themes going on, and like the character drama is still happening. There's scenes where the two main characters are rocks and they're just sort of like talking to each other through subtitles. But because you know these characters so well, you're reading it in their voices.
Still touching scenes. It's, like some of those rocks emote better than some other actors in some other movies that come out this year.
It was just a really magical film. And I'll also point out Everything Everywhere All at Once has the rocks with googly eyes on it. And Night of the Coconut as well is a coconut with googly eyes on it. It was the year of the googly eyes, I think, stuck on these
They're coming back.
Just really made movies interesting.
Now we just need a couple movies featuring Pogs. We'll go full circle Pogs here with the nostalgia.
It's funny because I was just going to like say, we don't need everything to be gritty. And that was the nice thing about these last couple entries.
Oh, yeah.
Like Everything Everywhere All at Once, it wasn't gritty. Like you mentioned before with Avatar, things are bright and colorful and visually really interesting. It was just, and the world building going on in this movie was really top notch too. Like just how they explain all the different timelines and universes and stuff and how they sort of jumped each one was really unique. I look forward to watching this one again. How's your number 3 looking over there?
Oh, I already went number 3. It was RRR. I segued in.
That's right.
My number 4 was RRR. My number 3. So I kind of carried on that conversation. So seamless that even you didn't notice.
It was seamless. I didn't even notice that I broke it. Maybe we'll just cut that.
I've mastered the segue.
All right. So this is really like feet to the coals here. What is your number 2?
So just for clarification, I was going back my number 1 and 2 movies about which one would be in the number 1 and number 2 slots. I had number 1 locked in for most of the year, and then number 2 came along, and I was like, oh, you had to make it difficult for me. So these ones, another timeline, another very close timeline, these could have been interchanged. But number 2 for me was David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future.
Okay, I was wondering where this was going to land for you. Like I was just editing the Crimes of the Future podcast episode, and I could hear it then. Yes, please.
Yeah, Crimes of the Future, again, kind of like Men, where I completely understand how some audiences are just not going to connect with this movie. I think for fans of Cronenberg specifically, this was an amazing movie. This was a fine return to form, I guess, to body horror. Not that his non-body horror stuff wasn't good, but I think there's something special about David Cronenberg and the body horror genre going back to the good old days of, you look at The Brood and Scanners, Rabid, going way far back.
Mm-hmm.
And then Videodrome, all of his kind of classic stuff. Shivers, obviously, going back to the very beginning. And this was Crimes of the Future, felt like it fit in perfectly with all of those movies. And it felt like this was David Cronenberg as well in this phase of his filmmaking career. There was a lot of meta commentary I felt on his own filmography. There was a lot of questions. This movie is so densely layered, that is, in terms of theme. One of the themes was artistic expression. What is art? You know, nothing too heavy. But I feel like that theme specifically, going back over his own filmography, like what does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to be a provocateur? What does it mean to be reactionary? And trying to be reactionary, or trying to be provocative and trying to be part of the counterculture, do you become reactionary instead, right? Mm-hmm. And then, just in terms of commentary on human evolution, and that kind of how do you find balance and synthesis with your environment. There were environmental themes of human evolution, themes of societal structure, themes of artistic expression, looking at the difference or interrelation between pleasure and pain. Again, a very Cronenberg kind of theme. This is also the movie that got me. I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from writing movie reviews to focus more on the podcast. Crimes of the Future, it got me writing about movies again. I was so inspired. I'm going to have that.
Reignites the hobby.
Yeah. I was watching this and I felt completely re-energized. I felt so engaged. I had the word just came pouring out of me. Just on the podcast episode 2, I talk at great length. You can't shut me up about this movie. Crimes of the Future, David Cronenberg. As a massive Cronenberg fan and just as a fan of movies in general, some people were saying oh, it's so tame for a body horror movie. I don't know, man. Maybe people are just so desensitized, because there were a couple scenes in there where I was squirming. I was getting pretty uncomfortable watching this.
Well, it wasn't in your face body horror maybe they were expecting. It was a little more subtle, the ramifications of what they're doing and why they're able to do it and what's going on with their bodies is just really terrifying.
I don't know what the world is coming to when somebody getting oral sex performed on a giant gaping wound in their stomach is too tame for people, but I guess that's the world we live in now. But Crimes of the Future for me, if you're a huge Cronenberg fan, check it out. Even if you're not a Cronenberg fan, this is the perfect entry point. It feels like Cronenberg is one of those directors who doesn't feel like you feel his age behind the camera. It feels like he's still got that razor kind of sharpness to his commentary, to his social commentary, and to his satire that sometimes as you maybe gets dulled for an older filmmaker. But this felt like this could have been made by 25-year-old Cronenberg as easily as 70-year-old Cronenberg. Amazing movie, visually stayed with me. I'm still think about it at least once or twice a day, months afterwards. Great movie. What's your number 2, Brian? I'm going on about Crimes of the Future again here.
Surgery is the new sex.
Yes. And then coming out
Love
that,
it.
long live the new Flash back in the day. Surgery is the new sex. Come on.
Everyone owes it to themselves to check this movie out for sure. But yes, moving forward, my number 2, I mean, this was definitely a fish out of water here, flip-flopping back and forth between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I ended up with number 2 as Nope. You talked about Jordan Peele's movie a bit earlier. This movie hit with everything I love about movies. It has that sci-fi element to it. It's got some mystery there. It's got all sorts of good themes. The imagery is out of this world. The characters are awesome. The acting is phenomenal. The direction is wild. There's that one horror scene with the Jupiter's children in the barn, and you're like, I'm on the edge of my seat. And I think we mentioned it in the episode. It's just this is Jordan Peele flexing at this point, saying I can make any type of horror movie I want to at this point. This dude so far can do no wrong. We've said it before. These are 5 banger films, 15 out of 15 stars, or however you want to rate it. It's almost criminal it doesn't get more recognition. I mean, outside the awards, which are neither here nor there. They do well at the box office, I think, but I want everybody to go see these movies and just appreciate what's going on here. Talking about repeated viewings, I'm going to watch this movie a dozen times in the next few years. It just works for me on every level. It's just, man, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, we've talked an entire episode about it before. And go check out our episode on it. Go watch this movie. Just it's number 2 for a reason. It could be number 1 easily. One of my favorite. I mean, I went to see this movie twice in theaters this year. When I talk about rewatching a movie, usually I watch it in theater, come home months later, buy the Blu-ray, watch it again. No. I watched this in theater with you, and then 2 weeks later, I'm back in the theater watching this again. It was just phenomenal.
One of those movies I stepped out of, and I was like, yeah, this is 4.5, 5 stars right away, right off the bat. There was no question. I remember watching it, even though it was a horror movie, but I had a smile on my face through a huge chunk of this movie, not because it was funny the whole way, but because I was just like, I was having such a good time watching this. Good. It's so weird to say good time. It's a horror movie.
Yeah.
But just like the caliber of filmmaking is just so impressive. Incredible movie.
I love the world building that happens here, like the monster stuff. I'm not going to get into spoilers for it all, but it's just, it's so interesting. And I think for me, like good sci-fi is based on like a social commentary foundation.
Yes.
And this movie, I mean, it's a horror, but it's also very sci-fi. And I think that's really what I'm drawn to here. And Peele and social commentary, I mean, this guy, he's nailing it in every single movie he does. And seeing that combination here, you're like, yeah, this movie is going to excel in all sorts of ways. And you mentioned before, like some of the fan service, the Akira slide. There's all sorts of other like little throwouts throughout the movie. Like even the Saturday Night Live bit brought me back to watching SNL back in the 90s and them mentioning like the characters like Chris Kattan and whatnot. Like it's all like maybe this is more relevant for us because it's kind of our generation, right? Like it's just, I run out of words to describe how good this movie is.
Nope is one of those movies, and I love movies like this where I go home afterwards, or after I watch the movie. Like Nope and Men were movies like this for me, where I'm going online looking up people's interpretations. And like looking at, I read 10 different people's thoughts and there's 10 different interpretations and they're all going to different layers of that same movie. Like there's so many layers and so much depth. Maybe one of the reasons that Jordan Peele's movies haven't maybe gotten that huge push. They've all been profitable, but like they are talking about some very serious topics, specifically racism as a huge one, classism, those are hard conversations to have. And some people just don't want to have them. And so I think that does play a factor in, whether or not your films get recognized. He's bringing up difficult subjects and hitting on difficult topics, but those are topics that need to be discussed. And I think besides being an amazing movie, I think Jordan Peele is pushing those conversations that we need to have forward in a meaningful way.
Very well said. We have to now talk about the number one slot in our lists. Which movie takes the crown for you?
And I'm really curious about which one takes the crown for you. My number one is one that you've already mentioned. It is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Oh, yes.
I watched this movie again, thinking, how could this possibly live up to the hype? And it exceeded all my expectations. I was in love with this movie from the very first frame, very first scene. It pulled me in. Like you were saying, like this is one of those movies, I liken it almost to Donnie Darko, where it's a movie, it's a love story, it's an action movie, it's a sci-fi movie, it's a philosophical debate about, what it means to be human. Essentially it is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. The title is like literal, but it doesn't feel jam-packed. It feels like, there were two blockbuster or bigger budget, more popular movies about the multiverse. Only one of them made our list, probably for very good reason. This one was not just about special effects, although the creativity and what they were able to do with their budget was incredible. Amazing. It was incredible. Like you were saying, just in terms of the narrative, like the world building and how they explain the technology and explaining how they kind of jumped across universes. Somebody trying to give themselves paper cuts in between their fingers to learn kung fu. Like that sentence, if you haven't watched the movie, that makes literally no sense. Those words together. Yeah. But you have, like you said as well, Michelle Yeoh, Stephanie Su, Kiwi Kwan, James Hong, who I'm not going to forget this time.
Oh, yes.
And Jamie Lee Curtis, many, many others as well. Glad to see Michelle Yeoh finally, I don't know why it's taken this long, but like to get this level of recognition. She's been doing amazing work for decades. And I don't know, was she nominated? I don't follow the Oscars really, so I don't know if she was nominated for anything.
She was nominated. She was nominated for this movie.
Excellent.
Yes.
I'm really happy for her. I'm really glad that audiences are starting to recognize Michelle Yeoh's great work. I hope hope introduction with Everything Everywhere All at Once gets people to dig into her back catalog. Maybe is the way to put it.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about this movie. It was exciting, heartfelt, funny. It felt like I went on a journey, a wild ride, but it wasn't exhausting. It wasn't overwhelming. Just the right amount of whelming. I was perfectly whelmed, which is a weird thing to say, but Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was an amazing, amazing movie, and I can't recommend it highly enough for people to go check it out if you haven't already.
Truly, it was like the icing on the cake of 2022 movies. It was just phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it in great length before.
Yeah, and the sense of like a movie about exploring like nihilism to feel so hopeful by the end while not dismissing nihilism entirely out of hand. There's such a balance in terms of themes here going on. And again, you could write essays and essays. You could write thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words on this movie and still only be scratching the surface. It's that densely layered and that richly thematic. And also just from a filmmaking perspective, just a fun, engaging, emotional ride. It was great. All right, Brian, what's your number one? I'm really curious about this.
You're curious? You don't have any guesses on this? I thought this might be more obvious. I don't know, based on my honorable mentions and whatnot, but it is Banshees of Inisherin.
Ah, okay.
I did flip flop back and forth on where this should be, one or two, and I kind of did like this old bubble sort, and it just found its way to the top somehow.
Not somehow. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's specific reasons why it's at the top. And I think going back to like just seeing like the initial trailer for this, I'm thinking, oh, that kind of looks like a nice little quirky comedy of sorts, right? And then going to see it in theater and be like, wow, that was really something else. And I really took to its commentary on friendships and whatnot as well. It's like seeing some of the elements in your own friendships, like my own friendships and past relationships. And it's just picking up on the other themes that are going on and seeing how much more layered they are as well. I mean, our conversation about it was even more eye-opening. I'd seen stuff about like the anti-war messages in it, but it's like when we talked about it, it's just like, man, it's throughout the whole movie. It's not just like a little bit here and there. And how the movie can perfectly bring about these themes throughout the entire thing. It's not just like one or two scenes that talk about these different elements. It's every single thing working together. It's like this giant
Rube Goldberg machine.
Rube Goldberg. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Seeing all these gears working together at the same time to get to one final point. You're like, man, how does Martin McDonagh do this? Like, this is masterful writing. I don't think I've seen a better written movie this past year. It was just so, I mean, I shouldn't say that because all these movies are so good.
I think that's his strength, though. He started off, I think, as a playwright, and I think that shines through. Where like it's the writing, and like you say, the themes are baked into everything from the characters to the visuals. Everything feels so cohesive, like an intricate machine working together. He's balancing a lot of spinning plates at once, and you think like, well, how can he do that? Like, something's got to give eventually, right? Like this can't.
And it never does.
It's an amazing movie, start to finish. It's darkly comedic, which may not be up everyone's alley as well, right? Like McDonagh's stuff is like, it's not for everybody. People are saying like, oh, like it's so dark, but he's making jokes. It's like, yeah, exactly.
That's the other thing I really liked about it was the dark comedy. That really spoke to me. I love that in these movies. I love the dialogue, just the way the characters are talking to each other, the relationships they have with one another. And it's like one of the most touching moments for me was when, oh my goodness, he's basically talking about his sister. This is Colin Farrell's character talking about his sister and how
Siobhan.
Brendan Gleeson's character is saying like nobody will be remembered, like, and being remembered as nice and whatnot. He's just like, well, I'm going to remember my parents. And he's like, I'm going to remember my sister, and his sister's standing like kind of behind him, and he doesn't know she's there. And it's like just speaking that honesty, like just this guy is so legitimately.
He wears his heart in his sleeve. There's a certain innocence to him. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then seeing that innocence being torn away to the point where he's just beyond the point of like self-repair at the end of the movie was like this really tragic storyline that I don't know, but like that character arc was just brutal and amazing and incredibly endearing. It was just, this movie was everything. And it did kind of take me by surprise, this whole film. I wasn't expecting this. It was just awesome.
Little faith. And I think this is one of those movies too, where again, it's so richly layered. I think you really latched on to like the commentary on mental health and depression and that kind of thing. That stood out to you. To me, like the anti-war, human conflict themes stood out more. That's what makes, I think, a common theme through all of our kind of top movies here is that these movies have so much more going on than just the surface level narrative, that there's so many themes and so many ideas, and you can dig deep. These movies are all conversation starters where you can watch this movie and go and grab a beer with your buddies after the movie and just talk for hours and wax philosophical about life. And it's all because of a bunch of moving pictures and sound. It's incredible, actually. Like a lot of these movies. And I had trouble. Banshees of Inisherin, I had trouble placing some of these movies.
Oh, it's so difficult to place these.
It was one of those movies too. Like I was watching it, and after I finished watching it, I'm like, okay, this is going on my top 10 list for sure. It's just a matter of how do I slot this in?
Where can it fit in there? Yeah. It's such a difficult task to put together a ranked top 10 list, and there's so many of these entries that could easily flip into different positions on the list. There's so much room. I mean, we watched 50 plus movies this year, and I think this year was a really good year for movies, honestly. And like for myself, just based on the star ratings, I'll just throw out here the stat that there's only 11 movies I rated 2 stars and under out of 100 movies I've watched so far from the year. And it's like, that's to me a pretty low percentage. I didn't really dislike movies this year. And it's like, I'm thinking back to last year where we put together like a bottom 5 and
You're getting soft in your old age.
I know. I honestly, I think so. There's a lot of stuff rated 2.5. And it's like, I don't really regard 2.5 as a bad rating.
It's a mediocre, yeah.
In any event, it was a really good year for movies. I think that was a really solid list for us, for each of us there, our top 10s.
It was nice to see some differentiation. A lot of times we tend to be fairly close, so it's nice to see that there was at least some differences there in our top 10 list. I don't want to get too stagnant for our viewers out there, our listeners rather.
Yeah, I was happy to see some of the entries show up on yours. I mean, we've also talked a lot about these movies in their own standalone episodes, which I found we didn't do as much in last year's list. If you go back and listen to 2021, most of the movies we talked about here, we had a dedicated episode for. We've gone through, and I think that helps to appreciate the movies even more so. I don't know if there's a correlation there, but I mean, I don't think, like, especially our top 10s, there's nothing going to stop these movies from showing up there. It's just
Well, I think there's a reason that we chose to do episodes about them and had them in our top 10. It's probably for the same reason.
Right.